From its very opening moments, Dredge wastes no time before instilling discomfort. As our protagonist, an unnamed angler seeking work in the isolated region of the Marrows, approaches his destination, his ship crashes on rocks shielded by fog, and as he emerges, he's greeted by the mayor of the sleepy wharf town of Greater Marrow, who informs him that his vessel is unsalvageable and as such he's been outfitted with a new one, along with a small debt to repay and improve the town as he brings in hauls of fish. The mayor is an odd, suspiciously enthusiastic fellow, presented as an angular mosaic of sharply contrasting colors, looking like a 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐬𝐿 character portrait after a few generations of inbreeding. Numerous other characters have a similar look, some of them strange, subtly malicious, and a bit grotesque, others weary and downtrodden as though the mere fact of existence weighs upon them. They're chilling in a way that distresses and entertains in equal measure, creating distrust in the player with no clear reason why. All of these people have unique backgrounds and needs, but most agree on one thing: wherever you choose to find your catches of the day, do your best to be back by sundown, because as the local fishmonger so ominously puts it, it's better to come back with a small catch than not to come back at all. As you may have imagined by now, Dredge is a game about fishing, but its RPG-like progression and foreboding undertones quickly make it much more. You live out each day bringing in whatever you can find in the bay via simple fishing minigames with different wind conditions depending on the fish, or, other things you're trying to catch. It starts a bit simple, arguably even a bit monotonous. Dawn is at 6 AM, at which point you can roam the bay or travel to nearby islands looking for different species of fish or salvaging material from shipwrecks. But be careful. When your boat's on the move or your rod is in the water, time is rapidly ticking and night comes before you know it. Usually just 4 to 5 minutes in real time, and if you're not back to a dock by then, things start getting weird. Rocks will appear where there were none before. It becomes more likely that you'll catch a fish that seems unnatural, a toothy, cursed thing that doesn't seem of this world, or perhaps you'll see a boat in the distance that disappears the closer you get to it. It's all harmless, if a bit unsettling, until it becomes much more than that. The day-to-day cadence of Dredge is a huge asset to its immersion. Every morning you must leave the dock with a plan. Wandering aimlessly means the day might end without much to show for it. Thankfully, a handy board chronicling your pursuits tracks different requests from locals or general goals you can tackle each day. Some will progress the story, and some will just give you some useful material for upgrades, and you'll surely need them. Your boat starts as not the most capable of vessels. It moves slowly, fishes slowly, and can't take much damage before capsizing. But with each wreck you salvage or quest you complete, more options unlock to upgrade and expand your cargo space, buy new gear for more efficiency in your anglering, fishing at new depths or biomes, or powering the engine for faster travel. And you'll very, very much want to do that, because you'll have to fish at night eventually, and you better be prepared. Nighttime is when some unique species come out, most notably the occasional eldritch abomination you reel in from fishing spots covered with what look like wisps of mysterious neon smoke. If you bring those back to town to sell to the fishmonger, he'll pay more than usual. After all, he hears the fish whispering to him and has to hear what it wants to say. You know, typical fisherman day doing typical fisherman things. As an RPG allowing you to play the role of an angler trying to make a living, Dredge does its job fantastically well. The odds are clearly stacked against you, and the upgrades are a compelling way to take control over this angry ocean. But to get them, you'll need to be efficient and smart. Your cargo space is very limited in both size and flexibility. Stashing cargo in Dredge works similarly to the Tetris-style equipment inventory of Resident Evil 4. Every item will have a certain size, and many don't fit nicely. They'll require you to slot them in strange angles or arrangements which could be difficult to make work when considering your core equipment, like fishing rods, light for the nighttime, and even the boat's engine also take up space in the cargo hold, and can't be moved without uninstalling and reinstalling them at a dock, an exercise that also takes a chunk of your in-game daylight to do. And if you damage your boat by hitting rocks or getting attacked by things, parts of your cargo hold will be damaged, and you'll either lose equipment in them or lose the ability to store anything new there until you can dock for some pricey repairs. Everything in Dredge comes at a cost. Want a bigger, faster engine? It's going to take up more spots in your cargo hold, and you better make sure it's upgraded to be able to fit an engine that big. And if you want that upgrade, you're going to have to scavenge for the materials from shipwrecks and offshore debris and pay the shipwright to build and install them. Want to fish in both shallow and oceanic water without having to return to the dock and change equipment? Better make sure you're unlocking equipment that takes up less room and the ship is equipped to efficiently store them. The story progression usually involves catching certain types of fish with specific equipment or conditions, so getting ahead of your upgrades will serve you well. It's not as nitpicky as it sounds, I promise. While managing your inventory and having to return to dock because you caught 3 fish that happen to be kinda big can feel a little tiresome, it also makes the game that much more immersive. It gives me a touch of a Death Stranding vibe. You have a job to do, deliveries to make, things to sell in order to find upgrades and pay for repairs, and making all of that too easy would trivialize things. In the same vein, Dredge's limitations around speed, cargo space, and even daylight make sailing a serious gameplay mechanic, and forces the player to make decisions that matter or risk being unprepared for what's to come. As a fishing game, Dredge is a bit less successful, if only because fishing isn't much the main draw. It's a core part of the game and you'll be doing a lot of it, to be clear, but none of it is especially difficult, with the only thing at stake being a waste of in-game time if you aren't productive. If anything, I feel the fishing minigames could have stood to be a little more difficult, but they do at least mix it up. Most of the time you'll be looking at a wheel with moving lines you have to stop in green zones, which get smaller the more difficult the catch is. Occasionally a trickier yellow zone will pop up, giving you the chance to land a trophy catch, which are, as you'd figure, worth more at your local fishmonger. Dredging for equipment is a slightly different minigame, though perhaps an even easier one. It's clear enough that building a deep fishing simulation is not Dredge's goal, so what's here works, but threatens to be a bit tedious if minigames or QuickTime events bother you. But as a horror game, Dredge is phenomenally successful, depending on what you're looking for. I personally love the skin-crawling uncertainty around cosmic horror and appreciate that it's less jump scares and run away from the scary thing horror, and more of an understated feeling of dread that ramps up the more you dig in. Dredge follows this template to a T. Night fishing can be a palm sweat-inducing stressful hell as you notice your hull can take one more beating before capsizing and you see the shape of some underwater leviathan hunting for you. Those of you wanting a traditional horror experience may be disappointed by the more under-your-skin and less conspicuous tone of Dredge's spookiness, but for those of you who want to explore a world where strange tentacles emerge from the bottom of the sea, a long-toothed slippery horror slips into your hull as you make your way to shore, or you find a stranded man who's lost his mind muttering, "It's coming for our breath, we won't be needing it soon," you're gonna love this game. The story also kept me hooked, pun intended, throughout, with lots of creative, unpredictable scenarios and a great addition of messages in a bottle floating at sea used to add lore. The ending is a bit predictable compared to the rest of it, but is satisfying and effective nevertheless. There's also the matter of your angler's panic level, shown as an eye at the top of your screen that gets increasingly jittery and paranoid if you start to avoid sleep and spend too much time in the nightly fog. I won't spoil what happens when that panic level gets too high, but trust me when I say, you'll want to take care to get some sleep when you need it. As unpleasant as the imagery coming out of Dredge sounds, the game is honestly beautiful to look at. It may not have the most detailed textures or fancy lighting effects, but Black Salt Games has an impeccable grasp on their art style. The hand-drawn artwork of the 120+ species of underwater wildlife you fish out of the ocean is excellent, with the creepier creatures appropriately looking the part. But Dredge is also a game of thematic contrasts, and there are plenty of times you'll have dolphins swim alongside your boat and watch a whale breach the ocean in front of you as the sun sets on the horizon and reflects over the water. The locations have a good variety to them too, from a quiet wharf town by a lighthouse to cliffs with a giant waterfall to mysteriously bioluminescent coral reefs. And while all of that looks great on PC, one thing I also cannot say enough good about is how it performs on the Steam Deck. Now, Dredge is already verified for Steam Deck, so it's not a surprise that it works on it, but the developers clearly didn't just check that it launches and call it a day. Out of the box, Dredge runs at a rock-solid 60 frames per second with all settings maxed out at the Steam Deck's native resolution. For hours, I would play on deck with the frame rate counter in the corner, and aside from the occasional drop due to a menu transition, never once did I see that number fall below 60 during the core gameplay. For any 3D indie looking this good, I'd say that alone is impressive, but somehow it lasts for a full 4 hours at a time without needing a charge. So, needless to say, Dredge may not have the most cutting-edge visuals out there, but it is one of the most optimized 3D Steam Deck games I've ever seen. That said, one caveat, Dredge has some fairly aggressive chromatic aberration on by default. For those who don't know what this is, it's an image distortion effect that supposedly makes games look more cinematic, but many people, including myself, are not really a fan. So I figure I'd mention if it bothers you as much as it did for me, it's in accessibility settings rather than display settings, so you'll want to turn it off from there. Dredge's music is solid and fitting for the theme, even if I wouldn't necessarily call it memorable. And though there's no voice acting, the game's sound design does a great job of immersing you in its world. It's a great game to play with headphones because when you're out in open waters and the sun sets below the horizon, hearing the howling winds around you and ungodly deep thrums of nightmare fish who clearly want to make you the seafood, you're bound to want to race to shore before long. Dredge will not be a game for everyone. If a game where you play as a fisherman trying to make ends meet sounds boring to you on its own, you may find the fishing minigames, the day-to-day pacing, and the upgrade loop to feel more like a chore. But for others, even those minor flaws will seem to serve the game's immersion in a broader way. Not only is Dredge the easiest golden genie I've awarded so far, but it's already an early contender for my 2023 Game of the Year and could easily go toe-to-toe with any of the indie masterpieces I played in 2022. It took me a little over 10 hours to beat with some side quests sprinkled throughout, and completing everything is bound to take at least a few more, but its pace is perfect and it introduces new ideas the whole way through with some tremendously creative ones that I'm not here to spoil. Dredge is a solid fishing game, a great RPG, and a masterful cosmic horror experience, and even with those unruly mix of genres, it emerges as more than the sum of its parts and an absolutely unmissable experience.